Warning: the Curious Native podcast contains mature topics and themes that are intended for an older youth and adult audience. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey, welcome to the Curious Native podcast. I'm your host, hunnasmak, and in today's episode, we will be talking about the true history and nature of Thanksgiving and its genocidal past, and the fact that it's been so freaking whitewashed and completely commodified for a white audience. It's honestly it's been a crazy month as a Native person, so you guys will have to bear with me. It's also very disappointing that Native people only ever get, opportunities during this Thanksgiving month to come to schools and stuff to speak on different, communities, histories of the such, when, we're here all year round. These are our lands, so please, support Indigenous people all year round, not only during the Thanksgiving times. I do want to say, put my respects out to let me see, I have my notes ready for this because I was not going to be caught lacking. The Wampanoag tribe, and peoples and communities, I would like to, pay my respects to you guys, as this, this is a very, if this holiday sucks for me, and most certainly it sucks for other Indigenous peoples, it is probably awful. It's completely awful, and I want to pay my respects, and, to the Wampanoag peoples. Yeah, so if you're interested in what I have to say about this disgusting genocidal holiday, please keep on listening. The true genocidal story of Thanksgiving is a dark and often overlooked aspect of American history. While the holiday is celebrated as a time of gratitude and unity, it holds a painful and tragic history for a lot of Native peoples. The story of Thanksgiving is not simply one of people coming together and peaceful cooperation between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag tribe, but one of betrayal, violence, and genocide that has had a long-lasting effect on Indigenous communities. The first Thanksgiving in 1621 is often portrayed as a harmonious feast shared between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag tribe. However, the narrative overlooks the true history of the Pilgrims' arrival in America, which was marked by violence, disease, and the eventual displacement and genocide of Indigenous peoples. The arrival of the Pilgrims led to the decimation of the Wampanoag people, as diseases brought by the Europeans ravaged their communities. The relationship between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people was not one of equality or mutual respect. The Pilgrims viewed the Wampanoag as inferior and sought to conquer and convert them to their religions. This resulted in violent conflicts and the eventual subjugation of the Wampanoag people. The true story of Thanksgiving is one of exploitation, bloodshed, and the systematic erasure of Indigenous cultures. The impact of the Pilgrims' arrival on the Wampanoag people cannot be understated. The introduction of European diseases completely devastated their populations, leading to the widespread deaths and suffering. Additionally, the Pilgrims' expansion and settlement of the Wampanoag lands resulted in the forced removal and displacement of Indigenous communities, leading to further loss of life and culture. The genocide of Indigenous peoples did not end with the Wampanoag, but continued throughout the American history, obviously. The colonization and the expansion of the United States led to the displacement and extermination of countless Indigenous communities, a lot of different lands, animals, resulting in widespread trauma and loss. The true story of Thanksgiving is a testament to the ongoing legacy of colonialism and genocide and colonization that continues to impact Indigenous communities to this very day. The erasure of the true genocidal story of Thanksgiving perpetuates harmful myths and denies the suffering and resilience of indigenous peoples. It is crucial to acknowledge and confront the history in order to work towards healing and justice for all indigenous communities here in the Americas. By recognizing the true story of Thanksgiving, we can honor and amplify the voices and experiences of those who have been marginalized and oppressed. As we reflect on the true genocidal story of Thanksgiving, it is important to consider the ongoing impacts of these atrocities on the indigenous communities. The trauma and loss inflicted upon indigenous peoples continue to manifest in issues such as poverty, health disparities, and cultural erosion. By acknowledging the true history of Thanksgiving, we can acknowledge and address these deep-seated issues and work towards reconciliation and healing. It is most certainly essential to educate ourselves and others about the true genocidal story of Thanksgiving in order to challenge harmful narratives and promote a more inclusive and truthful understanding of American history. By amplifying the voices and experiences of indigenous peoples, we can work towards a more just and equitable society that acknowledges and respects all the contributions and significance of different indigenous cultures here in the Americas and around the world. The true story of Thanksgiving is, one of colonization, violence, and genocide that has had a devastating impact and effects on indigenous communities. By acknowledging and confronting the true history, we can work towards justice and healing for indigenous peoples and honor the resilience and strength of those who have endured countless atrocities and centuries of trauma and oppression. It is crucial to amplify the voices and experiences of indigenous communities and work towards a more truthful and inclusive understanding of American history. The traditional Thanksgiving story that many of us were taught in school has been perpetuated for centuries, but the truth behind the holiday is far darker and more insidious than many realize. The day that supposedly inspired the Thanksgiving story is 100% steeped in racism and genocide. The holiday itself is built on a false narrative that erases the atrocities committed against indigenous peoples. The day in question is the first Thanksgiving, which is often depicted as a peaceful gathering of the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag tribe in 1621. However, this narrative completely ignores the violent colonization and displacement of indigenous peoples that was taking place at the time. The truth is that the Pilgrims and other Europeans brought disease, violence, and land theft to the Wampanoag and other native tribes in the Americas. This so-called first Thanksgiving was not a celebration of unity, but rather a one-sided event in which the Pilgrims benefited from the knowledge and resources of the Wampanoag peoples, while the indigenous people suffered under the oppression presence of these settlers. Furthermore, the Thanksgiving story ignores the fact that the Wampanoag and other native tribes had been living on this land for thousands of years before the arrival of European settlers. The Pilgrims and other colonizers saw the indigenous people, they saw us as obstacles to be overcome rather than as a human beings with our own rich and complex cultures. This attitude led to mass displacement, violence, and the decimation of our populations through disease and warfare. The Thanksgiving story whitewashes this history and perpetuates the harmful myth of manifest destiny, which was used to justify the expansion of European settlers at the expense of Native American lives and land. The celebration of Thanksgiving also perpetuates harmful stereotypes and erases the ongoing struggles of indigenous people. The imagery of Pilgrims and Native Americans feasting together very much paints a rosy picture of history that ignores our systematic oppression and marginalization that we continue to face. By focusing on a fictionalized version of the past, the Thanksgiving story minimizes the very real trauma and injustices that Native communities have experienced and that we continue to experience to this day. In addition to its racist and genocidal origins, the Thanksgiving story is also a lie because it perpetuates the myth of European superiority and righteousness. By glorifying the Pilgrims and their supposed peaceful coexistence with the Wampanoag, the Thanksgiving story reinforces the idea that European colonizers were justified in their actions and that their version of history is the only one that matters. This erasure of indigenous perspectives and indigenous The use erasure of indigenous perspectives and the experiences further marginalizes different native voices and contributes to the ongoing erasure of their cultures and our histories and our voices. So now let's talk about when this dreadful holiday went national and the very controversial man behind it, at least controversial to native peoples and communities as far as I could tell. A lot of other people may like him for other reasons, and those reasons are 100% valid. Not, I'm not going to do that, but it's this man. Let's get into it. Abraham Lincoln is often remembered as one of the greatest presidents in American history, known for his leadership during the Civil War and his efforts to abolish slavery. However, his declaration of Thanksgiving as a national holiday has a dark and racist history that is often overlooked. In addition, Lincoln's involvement in the largest mass execution of natives further highlights the troubling relationship between the United States government and native peoples. On October 3rd, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued a proclamation declaring the last Thursday in November as a national day of Thanksgiving. While this may seem like a gesture of unity and gratitude, the reality is far more complex. The timing of Lincoln's proclamation is significant as it came in the midst of the Civil War and served as a means to foster nationalism, national unity and patriotism. It was also aimed at promoting a sense of American identity and pride at a time when the nation was most certainly divided. However, the irony of Lincoln's proclamation lies in the fact that it whitewashes the true history of Thanksgiving and perpetuates harmful stereotypes about native peoples. The narrative of the peaceful feast between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people erases the violent colonization and genocide that native peoples experienced at the hands of European settlers. Oh shoot, I lost my spot, excuse me. And that native peoples experienced at the hands of European settlers by promoting this false and romanticized version of history. Lincoln's declaration of Thanksgiving as a national holiday perpetuates racist and harmful stereotypes about native peoples. Furthermore, Lincoln's role in ordering the largest mass execution of natives adds an even darker layer to the history of Thanksgiving. In 1862, during the height of the Dakota War, Lincoln approved the execution of 38 Dakota men in Mankato, Minnesota. This act is a stark reminder of the injustices and violence that Native peoples have endured at the hands of the United States government. Lincoln's actions serve as a peaceful reminder of the ongoing trauma and the oppression that Native peoples continue to face. The celebration of Thanksgiving as a national holiday reinforces the erasure of Native history and perpetuates harmful stereotypes about Native peoples. It is a painful reminder of the violent and oppressive history of colonization and the ongoing displacement and marginalization of Native communities. By promoting this false and romanticized and whitewashed version of history, Lincoln's declaration of Thanksgiving as a national holiday perpetuates a very much racist and harmful stereotypes about Native peoples. It perpetuates the erasure of Native history and the ongoing trauma and oppression that Native communities continue to experience. In conclusion, Abraham Lincoln's declaration of Thanksgiving as a national holiday is a painful and racist moment in history. It perpetuates harmful stereotypes and erases the true history of colonization and genocide that Native people have endured. Additionally, Lincoln's involvement in the largest mass execution of Native people further highlights the ongoing trauma and oppression that Native communities continue to face. It is important to confront and acknowledge the harmful legacy of Thanksgiving and the ongoing impact of colonization on Natives. It is essential to hold space for the true story and history of Native communities and work towards meaningful reconciliation and justice. Kind of a recap. Thanksgiving, a widely celebrated holiday in the United States, has been a topic of controversy for many years due to its racist history and the perpetuation of harmful stereotypes. While some may argue that the holiday is just the time for giving thanks and coming together so I could eat my old white grandmother's shitty fucking potato salad. It is crucial to acknowledge the ways in which Thanksgiving perpetuates racism and discrimination against Native peoples. The roots of Thanksgiving stem from the colonial narrative that erases the violent colonization of indigenous peoples, the fucking murder and martyr of our communities. The traditional story of the Pilgrims and Native Americans coming together to give thanks hides the reality of exploitation, abuse, and the genocide that occurred as a result of European settlers' arrival in the Americas. By celebrating this narrative, Thanksgiving serves as a symbol of erasure and glorification of the colonial past, contributing to the ongoing marginalization, colonization, and genocide of Native peoples, communities, and nations. Furthermore, Thanksgiving brings with it a mockery of Native Americans by Thanksgiving brings with it a mockery of Native Americans by non-Native individuals. This is evident at the reenactment of historical events where non-Natives dress up as Native peoples in a stereotypical attire and engage in inaccurate and offensive representation of indigenous cultures. This not only perpetuates harmful stereotypes but also reinforces the idea that Native cultures are nothing more than caricatures to be exploited for the white gaze and entertainment. In addition to this, non-natives often engage in red face, a practice where individuals use makeup or other means to mimic the appearance of indigenous peoples. This practice is deeply offensive and dehumanizing and is very much, something that was like it's very much minstrel, excuse me. It reduces Native identities to mere costumes for non-Native enjoyment. In schools and community events, children are often encouraged to dress in offensive Native costumes, further perpetuating harmful stereotypes and disrespecting indigenous communities' cultures, as well as the indigenous children in these schools. Moreover, the sight of non-natives dressing like pilgrims while natives are expected to participate in these performances can be deeply hurtful and degrading. Like I mentioned, very fucked up for the native kids in the school to have to even witness. The glorification of the colonial past and the erasure of the violent history of European settlement contributes to the ongoing trauma that indigenous peoples face. When non-natives partake in these performances, it reinforces a power dynamic that perpetuates the subjugation of indigenous peoples. Beyond the historical and cultural implications, the holiday is also marked by the consumption of food and resources that have historically been taken from Native communities. The traditional Thanksgiving meal often includes foods that have deep cultural significance to indigenous peoples. However, the commercialization and commodification of these foods further contribute to the erasure and appropriation of Native cultures. It is essential to recognize Thanksgiving is not simply a holiday for giving thanks, but a reassertion of harmful narratives and practices that perpetuate racism and discrimination against Native peoples. The erasure of our violent, I hate the word ethnic cleansing, but that's the best word to come with right now. The violent ethnic cleansing that we face because of European settlement, the mockery of Native cultures, and the perpetuation of harmful stereotypes all contribute to the ongoing marginalization and dehumanization of indigenous communities. As such, it is crucial to critically examine the way in which we celebrate Thanksgiving and work towards a more inclusive and respectful acknowledgement of Native American histories and experiences. One way by doing that is by not celebrating at all. We'll get to that in a minute. In conclusion, Thanksgiving is a holiday that is steeped in racism and perpetuates harmful myths about the history of the United States. It is a day that celebrates the colonization of Native American lands and the subjugation and exploitation of indigenous peoples. Instead of partaking in a holiday that glorifies this history, we should spend our time educating ourselves about the true history of Native peoples, donating to and supporting indigenous communities, and actively rejecting the holiday all outright. You know what I mean? By rejecting Thanksgiving and its racist origins, we can take a stand against the whitewashing of history and honor the resilience and strength of Native communities. We can support organizations and initiatives that work towards uplifting indigenous voices and addressing challenges and injustices faced by Native communities today. This means actively seeking out information about the history and experiences of indigenous peoples and amplifying our voices and stories. Furthermore, choosing to reject Thanksgiving instead focus on education and support for indigenous communities can also be a powerful way to challenge and dismantle systems of oppression. It is a way to take a stand against the continued marginalization and erasure of Native communities and voices and experiences. By rejecting Thanksgiving and celebrating history and strength of Native communities, we can also actively contribute to the decolonization efforts that are crucial for creating a more just and equitable society. This means acknowledging and addressing the ongoing impacts of colonization on indigenous communities and supporting to reclaim and preserve indigenous communities, cultures, and traditions, not only here in America, but all around the world. In sum, by rejecting Thanksgiving and dedicating our time and resources to educating ourselves about Native history, supporting indigenous communities, and challenging racist narratives, we can create meaningful and impactful change that will create, a more just and equitable world. We must actively work towards honoring and uplifting indigenous voices and experiences, communities, and nations, and rejecting a holiday that is rooted in the racism and genocide of said communities. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got today. This was just an essay that I had written. It wasn't even going to be a podcast, but I was like, you know what, I'm just going to record it because it came out really good and I was very proud of it and all the research that went into this. It was a very painful one. This month just honestly sucks altogether. This world pretty much sucks right now. So before actually I get to my outro, I do want to say that I, hunnasmak at the end, and the host, creator, and producer of the Curious Native podcast, stands with Palestine. Free Palestine. 100%. I, as an indigenous person, this day is, already awful, but the fact that one of the most disgusting acts and most I've never seen this. I'm 20 years old, so this is like my first time seeing a straight up violent genocide in the means that like people, children, men, women are being bombed, slaughtered in the streets. It's absolutely disgusting, and I can't do it. I stand with Palestine. Free Palestine. If you want to, support it, go out and support Palestinians directly. There's ways you could buy chips for them because their internet is being shut off and shut on. There's a whole thing going on right now. Call for a ceasefire on social media. You could call. I have a post on Instagram right now that has the phone number for the state secretary. The state secretary, I don't remember exactly who it is, but you can call and make a complaint about the fact that the United States is supporting Israel in their efforts with this genocide. If I haven't said it before, I'll say it again. Free Palestine. With that being said, though, if you would like to hear more from me and my podcast and what I have to say about the political status of this world, of this country, of whatever's going on within our communities, go ahead and like, subscribe, comment. Make sure you ring that bell Otherwise, you will not be notified about my posts, as I do not have that many subscribers. I did want to say, though, I did reach over 100 subscribers since my last episode. So thank you so much to the listeners who, support this podcast and who have been supporting me. Thank you so much for that. I truly appreciate it. I'm, on Instagram, it's Huskas, or Twitter, it's Huskasman, My podcast is TCN Pod, capital TCNP, lowercase OD. Yeah. With that being said, I'm your host, hunnasmak, and this has been the Curious Native Podcast.